All right. So maybe we'll begin. Just want to say good afternoon and welcome to everyone this afternoon. I guess you all know that we're currently, this whole series of webinars that's being organized to commemorate Child Safety Week from the 14th to 20th of November. Child Safety Week is really a movement, I'd say, stewarded by ARPAN, an organization that works to end child sexual abuse, where a number of organizations, individuals have come together to really to amplify the discussion and discourse on a very critical issue of child sexual abuse. And in this webinar this afternoon, over the next 1 hour, we're really going to look at towards the whole goal of amplifying these conversations on ending child sexual abuse and ending child abuse in general, how we can look at the role of various communities beyond NGOs and practitioners to see how we can co-opt them in this journey. And the creative communities are communities that have a voice. They can simplify very complex problems. And so really to look at exploring creative communities and the potential role that they have to join in, conversations to end child sexual abuse. Just like to share a little bit about Leher, and that's the organization I represent. Leher is a child rights organization, and we focus on prevention, child protection, and really building capacities of communities to learn, show leadership, and really work towards making the world safer for children. And a lot of our work focuses in the ground and in the digital space on sharing information and knowledge and creating respectful, open spaces to understand together, to grow together, and to hand over the baton of leadership to communities and to people on issues that relate to keeping children safe and child protection, children's rights. Really to explain, because many people keep saying, communities, what is communities and who are we really talking about? So just to explain in a minute, traditionally civil society, when we look at communities, we've always considered them to be physical groups, physical spaces with something common, such as perhaps habitation, living conditions, religion, caste, etc. And that said, acknowledging that there is a digital divide and that many people get left out, in today's world, the whole internet, technology, and the digital space has also created spaces for people to come together around common cause, common interests, hobbies, professions, where they sort of integrate offline and online experience to really discuss issues, promote work, promote concepts and ideas, including commerce and trade and things like that. So somewhere, these communities also have proven to be young, they have a voice, they're interactive. So we're really hoping that, there is scope, and I think Sambai Leher believes strongly that there is scope to find that common ground between these communities who exist and congregate in the digital space and children's best interests, safety, and protection. So really here today, the problem that we're sort of gathering to talk about is child sexual abuse. Most of us have had a brush with child sexual abuse in our lives, personally as children, as young adults, as professionals. Sometimes we don't realize it, we realize it much later, we tuck it and hide it away. It is an issue that exists in shades ranging from discomfort, awkward jokes, objectification, words, gestures, to more aggressive forms of rape, use of children in pornography, child sexual exploitation. And as repelling and repulsive as the thought of abusing children is, somehow it has not been an issue that's been compelling enough for society to come together to really have in-depth discussions, to break the silence around it, to talk, to discuss, to understand, to report, to heal, and importantly, to also prevent, proactive actions to prevent child sexual abuse from taking place. Therefore, in this through this webinar, we really want to look at the creative community, people who are developing content a lot in the digital space, to really look at how their worlds intersect with children's issues, more specifically the issue of child sexual abuse, and to examine how these communities can take the issues forward through what they do, through their normal course of work, um, so as to enable us have more open discussions, break silence, and ask what we need, not just from government, but also from society, people like ourselves, to end child sexual abuse. That said, we'll move into the discussions now, and I will introduce our first speaker, and that's Kevin Lee. Kevin is the editorial lead at We Are Yuva, where he spends his time finding ways of breaking down complex social issues and current affairs for Gen Z. He has led social media campaigns for organizations such as Purpose, Save the Children, Instagram, and many more, and hosts a show which all of you must catch, Socially Distantly. No, Socially Distant, yeah, where he makes fun of the media. Prior to this, Kevin was senior correspondent at CNBC TV 18 for close to 5 years. Thanks, Kevin, for making the time to be with us today. And I'm going to put at you a set of questions, which I'm going to give you 10 minutes to answer any which way you want, kind of free flow conversation for you. So really, Yuva is a young platform that engages youths on social current issues and matters that pertain to youth themselves. Is child sexual abuse an issue that resonates with a platform like Yuva? Can it become an issue compelling enough to develop, for youth and young people to develop a nuanced understanding, a voice, and a deep engagement? How can this happen from your experience? And what's an optimum scenario? Like, where do you think, how far do you think we could take such conversations? Over to you, Kevin. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and thank you so much for that kind introduction. Very happy to be here on this panel today, along with some STM people who are doing, I think, far more important work. But I will try to value add a little bit into this conversation. This is a secret, and I hope this stays within this panel. But Yuva is a for-profit company. That part is not a secret. Yuva is a for-profit company. That part is well known. The secretive part of it was that when we started out, we didn't know that we would be talking about social issues in an important way. So Yuva started about 2 years ago. And initially when it started out, the reason that it started out was we recognized that the Gen Z was going to be this next big generation that's coming in, very different from millennials. This was at a time when companies, the media, etc., would refer to anybody under the age of 30 blanket millennial, and they didn't even recognize that there is already a new generation that's emerging. And this is before TikTok became a thing. This is before all of the things that you associate with Gen Zs became popular. This was before K-pop bands. This was before all of that stuff, right? The idea behind Yuva at that point was to represent the youth better in the media. And the original idea for Yuva was to develop web shows and movies that just represented the youth of the country better. That was the original plan. We didn't know that we were going to talk about social issues. And this is a long-winded introduction, but I promise I will get to the point and it will make sense. But Yuva decided, as a side project almost, to go on a roadshow across the country. We said we'll go to about 40, 50 cities, we'll go to hundreds of colleges and just talk to young people to see what they're like, because obviously you can't represent them while sitting in an office in Bombay, which a lot of people do. But we thought that we should do better. So we went on this roadshow, and then we realized that, young people are often mischaracterized as being happy-go-lucky and they don't care about anything. They're always looking at their smartphones. They don't care about people. They're antisocial, asocial. All of these terms are used to describe young people. Young people don't care about the news. Young people don't care about politics. And when we went on the roadshow, we discovered that young people care a lot, It's just that young people have this shared trauma. There's this mental health epidemic because nobody is listening to young people. Our media is making it worse by saying that this is what young people want when it's not what young people want. The internet has led to a unification worldwide of young people where you can now find your communities online, and these are the communities that young people would not have to go to if their offline communities were supportive enough. And suddenly we realize that there is no way to talk about things that are important to young people without talking about social issues. Uh, Earlier, young people content used to be associated with countercultures, right? You had your MTV, and I'm not sure what the generational equivalent of that was for the boomers. But MTV was seen as a thing ki acha, like बच्चे लोग को बस मतलब they want to smoke cigarettes, they want to do drugs, they want to drink alcohol, and they want to go to parties. The Gen Z, from my experience and from Yuva's experience, cares deeply about social issues. They probably care more about social issues than older people do because they recognize that they are the stakeholders, they are the people who are going to have to live with these issues in this world once the old people are gone. No rush or anything. But they recognize that. A young person might not care if Rahul Gandhi is prime minister or if Narendra Modi is prime minister as much as older people do, but they will care much more about Greta Thunberg because she's talking about the planet, and that's what the young person cares about today. The young person is saying to you that you can play your petty politics, you can do whatever you want in this country, but you are missing the larger picture. So things like climate change being a very prominent example is something that a young person cares about a lot more than one, people give them credit for, and two, than even older people. Armed with this knowledge that young people care about social issues, we stumbled upon another hurdle. There are organizations such as Leher, such as the organizations that a lot of us kind of know about who are doing extremely good work in their field. But one of the things that they have not been able to do in a great way has been communicate to young people and put out this vast expertise and vast knowledge in a way that young people can engage with, right? And we had this saying at Yuva whenever we talk about editorial issues that if you don't make the news interesting, then the interesting becomes the news. So, as content creators, you can't sit back and say that the audience wants to watch Salman Khan movies. The audience doesn't care about things like this. It is your job to build content in a way that young people care about the issues that you want them to care about. That's your whole job description. It is not to sit back and say that if I talk about a social issue, I am not going to get traction on it because people come to the internet for escapism, etc., etc. The internet is a manifestation of what our public spaces are today. Like in our offline public spaces, there will be people who care about social issues. The internet is exactly the same way. So now with, I think, burnt 5 minutes of my time establishing this, let me talk a little bit about child sexual abuse and why I definitely think that that's something that young people care about. And that's something that we can talk about in an interesting and engaging way. The issue with issues such as this often is that they are one note. Child sexual abuse is bad. There is not a lot of people who would disagree with that statement, thankfully. It is a well accepted truth. Now, how do you make that interesting, right? How do you make that engaging without selling out or without completely going against the principles of what you started out doing? And the answer to that is something that Nicole actually mentioned in her introduction. It is lived experience. Everybody's had a brush with this, with child sexual abuse, either directly or indirectly. It's unfortunately a reality that all of us have been shaped by, like in our early lives. And if you can bring out things that people don't necessarily associate with the larger concept of child sexual abuse or violence against children, but you can simplify it in a way that, hey, like, have you ever gone through this? Suddenly, that becomes a conversation that you're having. Suddenly, it's not a eat your vegetables lesson where you're telling people that, listen, child sexual abuse is bad. Suddenly, it's you asking people on the internet and you leveraging the power of the internet in the truest sense as an online community to say, hey guys, we've gone through this. Have you gone through this as well? And once they share their experiences, that's when it turns into a conversation. I think very often what we do wrong is we try to talk to people before we listen to them. And that's a monologue. And monologues are boring, as the people who are on watching this panel might be thinking about me. As soon as you make it a conversation, it just becomes a lot more engaging. It becomes a lot easier to talk about things like this. And then engagement comes from that itself. I think one issue that we've had at Yuva is that we've been able to break down complex social issues in a way that young people like and understand, in a way that young people will like, in a way that young people will watch. So we'll get the views, we'll get the likes, we'll get that engagement, which obviously is not the most important thing, but let's face it, it is an important thing. Because if you're talking out and nobody's listening, then what is the point of you talking? So, but the challenge has always been to do it in a way without really selling out in that sense. Without today's International Men's Day, and today you'll go and people will talk about masculinity today, and you'll be like, wow, okay, like they talked about it. This is as big a deal as International Women's Day was, right? And then tomorrow you go on the internet, and then again you see men are being painted in a particular way without talking about patriarchy and how it affects men, or without talking about masculinity and how men are also victims of masculinity. They're not by any means the primary victims of masculinity, but they are victims of masculinity, right? So I think in general, to sum up, we think a lot about how can we make this interesting, how can we make this engaging. But even in that hypothetical example in our heads, where we're thinking, how can we make child sexual abuse interesting to 20-year-olds, right? Who are interested in, again, K-pop bands and BTS and that kind of stuff. How do you make child sexual abuse as a topic interesting to them? The answer is talk to them about it. Don't talk at them and say 1 in 2 people faces this issue. Don't alienate them from the conversation. Don't take away their lived experiences. Take all of that in. The internet is a toxic place today, but at the end of the day, it is still a massive community of people. And as soon as you engage with them, you'll find that any social issue, not just child sexual abuse, is something that they will be interested in talking about. We have talked about sexual abuse at Yuva, and one of the ways that we've been able to do it successfully, while all of the flashy things that people like, oh, you got an influencer to do this. We did a campaign last year, and the centerpiece of that campaign was a short film with Karan Johar and Mithila Palkar, who are both massive celebrities in their own rights, right? We did a short film, and it's, again, this is a secret. It was my least favorite part of the campaign. My favorite part of the campaign was just putting out a story saying, ladies, what is something that you do for your own safety that nobody really talks about? And we had answers coming in saying that when I'm walking down the street, I take my house keys and I put them in my fist because I'm so scared that I'm going to be jumped. That is the reality that people are, living with. And as soon as you open it up to that without either glamorizing an issue or alienating people from it, I think you will find that not just young people, but everybody will be willing to have that conversation with you online in a productive way. We believe that the internet can be a good place. And I think we accept, as you are, that we have a role in making it a better place. And we have a role as content creators to engage with people to talk about these issues. So yeah, I think definitely child sexual abuse is something that young people do care about. It's something that Yuva's audience does care about. It's something that I think all audiences should care about. Maybe we just need to be smarter in the way that we are talking about it. So yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. No, I love that talk at them. I mean, talk to them, don't talk at them. And I think somewhere when you talk to and you don't talk at, there's also this issue of control, And I think somewhere when we want to engage and we want local ownership and leadership and participation on these issues, I think we have to open our minds to, not being able to control the outcome of those, the audience will take it where they deem fit, All right, thanks, Kevin. And moving on to our next speaker, Reema. Reema, welcome, and thank you again for making the time. Introducing Reema to our audience. Reema is the co-founder of Candidly, a platform that aims to develop and drive conversations on gender, abuse, sexuality, and how these manifest in the media through culture. At Candidly, Reema drives content and delivery of workshops on child sexual abuse awareness and prevention for children, parents, teachers, POSH, sexuality, adolescent health and well-being. In 2017, Reema helped create Equality, which is the country's first gender-cool merchandise line for children. She was chief editor at Ed3D, an Agra-based institution that focuses on experiential learning. Reema has also been a 2-time TEDx and Josh speaker. and advocates strongly about child sexual abuse awareness, sexuality education, and mental health in all public forums. She is currently writing a book on parenting and sexuality and all the awkward spaces that emerge in the process of childcare. This book has been approved by Penguin, and I think we look forward to seeing the release of this book in 2021. Reema has also written frequently for publications like Vice, Youth Ki Awaaz, The Scroll, Mint, Feminista, The Champa Tree, and Daily O. She also writes poetry. Welcome, Reema, and I'm going to put again a set of questions to you and leave it to you to answer freely. You work on prevention of child sexual abuse with parents, and you also represent the parent community. Talk to us about two things. What comes up when you're talking to parents about preventing child sexual abuse? What do we need to amplify, and how do we scale up these conversations with parents? Men in their different roles as groups to communicate with on child abuse, keeping children safe. Any insights from your body of work and experience that you have to offer us? 10 minutes over.
Okay, thank you, Nicole, for that very beautiful introduction, and I'm really happy to be here. Honored, really. I've been a big fan of everyone, every single organization present here for a long time. Learned a lot from everyone here. To begin with, I mean, I really, what Kevin said about so many things resonates very deeply with the work that we do and how we have, at Candidly, sort of grown, and in a way where we first started with child sexual abuse awareness. But in our first workshop itself, we realized that something really needs to shift to be able to create what we call a hook in people. And to do that, the conversations around CSA and all of these very serious, they are serious, but they sound so serious and intimidating to people that a lot of people back off from even entering those spaces because they're afraid of what might come up and what might, and also they feel men especially vilified a lot, and there's a lot of accusation and us versus them going on, especially in the internal workshop spaces that we see emerging. I mean, things really get heated up when it's women and it's men and it's parents, and it all becomes, you and you and you. So the first thing that I'd like to add to the first part of the questions that you said, what do I see could change or could really help in the whole conversation that we have around CSA is to create spaces which are informal. And when I say informal, I say, sitting on mundas and chai informal, where you're not in a very quote unquote traditional workshop setup where there's one trainer and everyone's listening. And to do that, sharing something that is personal, that is meaningful in a non-contrived way, where you appear vulnerable and yet brave. And so the way we started doing that was opening up with our own stories. And to create that connect with everyone who was present, and say that, look, I'm here too, and I see you, and I want you to see me. And then take it forward from there to expand the conversation in a way where you could put in all of the definitions of what CSA is and what do you do, what language do you use, what programs can you do with your children, and how do you go about creating conversations around these things in the household, in families, in schools, but doing it in a way which was warm, which was like family and community in the real sense of the word. And we tried to, in the past year, especially since we've all been confined, to create that, to create that same environment digitally as well. And in the beginning, it was like, okay, so how do we do this? And how do we do this? And the same thing worked, just being very open and vulnerable and starting off with your own experiences and your own stories, and just rejecting all language that was very, very strong. That was a should, a must, a have, and always, or a good or a bad or an evil, all of those binaries that really, really separate people instead of opening them up. And constantly doing that by paying attention to language, by the movies that you use, that we do a lot of screening in our workshops, and by the activities that we'd include, that would be anything from drawing or coloring with children to really, hanging up cutouts of underpants just to make kids laugh and to start the conversation from there. And these sort of things which people wouldn't normally associate with serious conversations like CSA, but to make it really warm and yellow in a way, where it's a house or a home that you're entering in, rather than a lecture that you have to listen to. I think if a lot more people did that, people like us who are already engaged like this and sort of consciously stay away from that very jargon-based language, and stay away from any binary sort of inducing language and a lot of boys do this or men do this, that could really change. One. And then two, I feel that for parents, especially when you're talking to parents, you get the sense that they're there to protect children, their children or other children, because they're afraid. But they're often only afraid for their children. And they forget to be afraid of what about if, what if my child, becomes an abuser? And what can we do to prevent that? Because all the world is bad and ugly, but, hamara bacha to masoom hai, and all children are innocent. But to forget that in that space where you're only worried about your child and you're only worried about keeping, that child safe, it makes all the other children seem like, oh my God, my kid can't do this, but, the other kids can. And that, I think, really limits the conversation and also limits the empathy, which is so needed to create and really create new nuance in all of these conversations. So that is something I feel that if a lot more organizations like us could do, to also talk about, so why do adolescent offenders do what they do? And what is restorative justice and how can that help? And what are the things, or what are the streams in culture, in media, in the books we read or the movies we see or the things that we are brought up with and the things we consume on a daily basis that do contribute in some way in creating an offender? And that offenders can also be women and girls, and it is not just boys always. To create that sort of another mirror image that makes a whole and not just parts. I feel that could really, really help widen perspectives and help in prevention in a big way. Because if you are talking about how do you keep your body safe with children, but also telling them how do you keep other people safe, and how do you respect boundaries, and what is consent, and what is not touching people without their consent, and what is even crossing boundaries in terms of language and movement or relationships or emotions, and what does all of that mean, and how do you then communicate that to children as young as 4, because that's how early we start. What are the language patterns that you use, what are the words that you use, and all of that, and how do you do it from a place that is free of judgment and of fear? That I feel really changes the way you approach the topic, because if you're creating fear, you're creating helicopter parents, and we don't need more of that. I see kids every day who are messed up because of the way they were treated in childhood, because of the way they were protected, but were not really protected, and broken in many, many ways. And so just, offset that fear with enabling children, with empowering children and adults to see, okay, this is how it is, and this is how I can do it in another way. And how do you change that from things like, when parents would come to us, they'd say, okay, so you're going to talk about abuse, is it? Is it going to be very graphic? And I'd be like, only if you're there. If your children are there, and then it's going to be different. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of dancing and a lot of singing, a lot of, your early warning signs, and a lot of role playing, and a lot of drawing and coloring with younger kids, and a lot of learning how to say no. And that is empowerment. That is not fear. So I feel creating that shift from saying, oh my God, every child is abused and this is so frightening and this is so scary, to what do we do now? How do we move beyond that? How do we move from a place of fear to a place of empowerment and courage and strength? That I feel if a lot more people did that, people like us, and also people who talk about youth issues, and just to stay away from a lot of blame and fear, that could really, really change. To come to the second part of your question, talking about men and boys. Now that's something that
2 minutes, okay?
Oh,
2
okay. All right. Now, talking about men and boys, I feel that if we sort of included, like Kevin also mentioned, topics like toxic masculinity and how does that turn men into aggressors and abusers, and how is it that they're suffering, and how does that change things within a family setup, and how does that limit men also from entering setups where they could learn more about how to protect their children and other children, and also to very consciously make an effort to include dads and not exclude them by thinking, oh, they're not responsible. But if you already feel like they're not responsible, they will never be responsible, and they will never feel included or welcomed or feel like a parent who can make a difference. And you see that everywhere. You go to nursery schools, a lot of dads are asked to step out when you go orientations happen and stuff like that happens. So that's one for men. If you stop looking at them as aggressors all the time, but also as conscious people who can change and who want to change and who want to know more. But how will that happen? Unless you make them feel welcome and not make them feel like aggressors all the time. And for boys, consciously realizing that they are victims too in many, many ways, not just sexually, but emotionally and psychologically. And how can we change that? How do we bring more focus on a male CSA? And how it happens and where it happens, and how do we create this sort of environment where they feel free to show that they're suffering too, and healing spaces which include all of these aspects to understand that only awareness and prevention is not going to change anything. So many of us going around with wounds. How do you create healing? How do you include healing in all of these conversations and all of these dialogues? That I feel if we were to sort of add to the mix would create something really beautiful and enabling. So yeah, sorry I rambled.
Yeah. No, you didn't. Thank you. That was powerful and poignant. And I think, lived experience, I'm here. I see you sharing our stories. It connects back to what Kevin said as well. I think that's a common thread, being inviting, creating spaces of empathy and healing, not just viewing certain groups of people in certain way, but really inviting everybody to be part of and to step out from seeing yourself or somebody you feel strongly for as only a victim, but accepting that all of us have a responsibility to keep ourselves and others safe. Thank you, Rima. That was indeed quite powerful. And Sonal, saving you for last because I want you to come back to the panelists and sort of echo as a practitioner what you're picking up from what they're saying. So I move on. And just for the audience, friends, here's a request. If you have comments or questions, you could put them into the chat or the Q&A, and we'll save 5 minutes towards the end to address some of these. Moving on to Amir Rizvi. I'm going to first introduce him to you. I can introduce him formally, and I can introduce him like over 10 minutes also with like there's so many things that he is. But Amir Rizvi is a designer. He's from the NID Ahmedabad. Currently, he works with the Center for Justice and Peace and designs communication. Citizens for Justice and Peace. I'm sorry, and is the communication designer for them. Rizvi is really passionate about human rights, he's been designing communication on social and human rights issues for the 2 decades that I know him, and perhaps much longer. He writes scripts, he writes songs. I mean, he's literally an all-in-one. He's been using his multidisciplinary skills to communicate on social media platforms. And he also participates very actively in social movements, in rallies, as they come up. So Rizvi, again, I'm going to pose a few questions to you. You've been designing communication for social issues for decades now, including child rights issues. So talk to us about the intersection of communication design and the issue of child sexual abuse. Is there scope for creative communities to help us develop and amplify an understanding and conversation on child sexual abuse, and some ideas, that come to your mind? 10 minutes, Riz, over to you.
Thank you, everyone. This is the first time I'm speaking on any webinar. Normally, I sit on computer and design. So there are many things which keeps going on in our mind when we are designing something. I have never put them in words while speaking. I'll try to put something. Uh, uh, I got sucked into child rights issues because of few assignments which I did as freelance designer. I had just completed NID, done some work in Bangalore, and then came to Bombay. And then I started working with some NGOs and I started doing work for my earning. So there was no focus as such. Whatever kind of work I was getting, I started doing it. So in design, uh, it is about understanding the problem and solving the problem is the design. So the process is completely never ending and it is always continuous. So when I delivered the assignments for the client, I felt that it might be completed in terms of assignment, but I had this feeling that it is incomplete because the problems are so huge and such large issues that just one brochure or one uh, annual report cannot meet that. And I'm talking about 20 years ago when Childline had predicted there'll be millions of people on the street uh, who will have uh, completely no care and they're going to grow up into large population of this country and there'll be issues which will be a big problem for the society because those children they don't have proper care. This is 20 years ago and I'm just seeing it right now every day. And it is really sad that that time nobody took it seriously. Even now, government is not taking it seriously. And it's a huge population which is just growing up without any kind of guidance. And which is already there. When we just see headlines and certain kinds of brutal news, we just get up everyone on social media and the first reaction is to kill that guy, Mardo Cardo. That happens for a few days and then we forget about it. And all of us have become overall very selfish as a human being where we just talk about our own children or our own comfort zone or own assignments. And after that, we forget about it. But things like child sexual abuse, child protection, these are almost like COVID-19 or something like that, where you can't just tell wear mask, you also have to wear mask. So we can't just say or design something and just forget about it. It is already there and it is rampant. And the numbers and all show like there are such a huge large number of abuse happening every day, everywhere, in every section of society. And when I look at my friends and creative community, I feel that we are almost like ostrich burying our head in the sand and we are not looking at the problem. We're just happy sharing things and real issues are actually kept aside. Even in our mainstream media or mainstream entertainment also, these issues have never been shown as a problem or crime. So there will be rape and there'll be something, but there won't be any sensitivity or showing something which is a crime about the child sex abuse. So I feel that uh, as a creative community on social media, there's a large community which is very effective and very influential because we are the people who create content and the content creators are the biggest influencers on especially on social media. So I feel that there is a huge scope because the work which has been done by various organizations over so many decades need to be showcased. And there are guidelines for architects who have created a safer environment. There are guidelines for all kinds of things are there, but it is not there visible on the social media. We have every family has a WhatsApp group, but that WhatsApp group doesn't have a guideline for having a safe group for children. When your child is also part of that group, and uncle shares a joke which um, uh, actually violates certain things. So I feel we have created an environment, especially the internet environment, is insensitive towards the children because uh, there was no planning when it came. So we just filled it up with our requirements, our entertainment, our this. So we didn't leave any scope for children. And access to internet and access to content has mm, there's no filter to that. Like it is really stupid to imagine it says that a content is for above 18 and expect a child to say I'm below 18. It's very that age is very curious. I relate to everything as personal experience. For example, when I was growing up in Odisha, and that time there was no sexual content available. There was no internet, nothing. And so even for adult movies, we used to make mustache with pencil to watch what adult movies are in theater to look like above 18 children. So I feel just expecting, putting the entire thing on children and saying that these content can't be seen by children is very futile. So whatever communication we are doing, we should make sure that it is effective and it makes some sense and it can be taken further. So I feel our this whole design community has a lot of responsibilities also, and they can play a very interesting role in spreading whatever we are trying to say. I also
Just 1 minute, Rizvi, huh? 1 minute.
Okay. I also feel that internet is not one homogeneous community. It is accessed by a cross section of people. Children and adults from across India are watching it, and certain meaning of the same word changes in various parts of India. For example, just the word child sex abuse, sex, yawn, word itself is unacceptable in certain societies. So they are so close to it that they don't even want to talk about. So we have to look at all those things also, and and uh, so there is a. So I feel right now we are talking about the creative community in urban India who are creating content. So in that community, we need to sensitize that community itself, and then they can take it further and spread more awareness and do some changes in society. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rizvi. I guess can't look at it as these are my takeaways, can't look at it as a one-time thing. We can't really talk about child sexual abuse through one campaign. It's got to be a continuous conversation. We've got to understand the diversities of our population, language, and somewhere I think what you highlighted that we don't often talk about, in this whole space of digital, we haven't really made room for children. We talk about keeping children safe, right? And that's like a big issue. But the architecture of the internet did not include children in it as it began. And I think that's a good point for us to ponder on. Thank you, Rizvi. And moving on to Sonal. Sonal, thanks again for being with us this afternoon. Sonal is founder director of Protsahan India Foundation, an organization that works critically on child protection from a psychosocial lens and encourages young girls from different backgrounds to reach their full potential with access to education, health, and gender justice. Sonal is a World Bank Fellow, Vital Voices Lead Fellow, Australia India Youth Fellow, and an alumnus of the Indian School of Business. She's pursued child protection law from the National Law School of India University and the Harvard University. She believes in order for children to thrive, they need to survive first. A step alongside quality education is maintaining a strong child protection system. And she's done a lot of work at that intersectionality of these two areas for the most marginalized children facing abuse and violence. Protsahan has also brought out a book that I'm just sharing so that the audience must check out. It's a book that helps talk about child sexual abuse to children, and it's called Can I Tell You Something? That was just an extra nugget of information. Sonal, before you start, I'd just like to ask you some questions. As you know, as I introduced you earlier, Sonal, you represent the tribe of practitioners working in the field. You wear many hats as an NGO who works with survivors, victims of child abuse. You facilitate and help the healing process for children. You also are a communicator, a trainer, and a curriculum developer. So listening to these panelists, what are you hearing? What are some of the key messages that you think must be amplified to the public at large towards awareness and prevention of child abuse? Yeah, over to you, Sonal. 10 minutes.
Thank you, Nicole. I think I don't know if my task has become easier or more difficult after all the fantastic people who spoke, before me. But I was taking down, pointers as to, what was the core part of what Rizvi said, or what Kevin or Rima said. And I think there's this very fine thread that I could feel. So, for example, Kevin, and that's my perspective and my understanding of, each of their conversations. And I'll try to kind of, ek hi thread mein, I'll try to pirogue it all together. So Kevin, in my understanding, he said something very basic, something that we still miss all the time in the sector or in this space of not just working with children or from difficult adverse backgrounds, but also I think generally in the space where we constantly have to raise funds or constantly have to talk about an issue. And he said something that we as people in the sector on the other side of the fence, we can't say, oh, is issue ke baare mein koi nahi sunega because it's boring. And when you have the IPL and the MTVs and the Bollywood and Shah Rukh Khans, then child sexual abuse nobody will listen to, and probably have to get a pop culture figure or a celebrity figure to talk about it. I think that's a very, very relevant point that Kevin said, which also leads me to the understanding that don't just make your communication as sort of a communication ki bhai karna hai, checklist onto your task of to-dos. Communication needs to be comprehension, I think jab tak, kyunki otherwise it will be just a broadcast message. Unless the people, the children, the communities that you work with, the media. So for example, in our case of working with children from violent or abusive backgrounds, so we work with not just the children, but the stakeholders around them, the parents, the educators, the judiciary, the people, or, the judicial members from the child welfare committees or the JJBs or frontline workers at Childline, like literally everybody who will be a part of this entire paradigm, jinko communication messages don't have to be broadcasted, but they have to be relayed in a way where they comprehend it, right? Which basically also the reason why we use a lot of art at Protsahan, I'll come to that. That's also a very interesting part of the story, how organically that happened for us. But something that, tying up with Kevin's part of the conversation, that you have to learn as NGOs or people in the space, learn to turn entertainment into engagement. Learn to make your messages entertaining. It might sound non-religious because these are dark issues that we work on, but why? So for example, I still remember in 2013, Nicole, we were talking about menstrual hygiene with some of the most marginalized children, marginalized girls, and we were using cartoons and music, etc. And the next thing we know is in the community, a lot of people now know about this, that somebody from the community came up and said, Sonal ma'am to yahan dhanda karti hai. Because we were using, creative tools of expression and talking about things where it will not just be a science anatomy, chart to broadcast a message, but to make it in a way where children comprehend the message. So sometimes all of this also comes with a lot of challenges on how you will turn entertainment into engagement. I think Rima sort of touched upon this very, very critical factor of empathy, right? And Shenchi, I've just taken this point down where she said that, moving from a place of fear to a place of strength, which how we use in our communication. I'm so sorry, this is my laptop making that sound and I have no idea how to switch it off. I'm so sorry. So it's like, so moving from a place of fear to that of strength, right? And how we use it in our sort of communication messaging is either for a fundraising campaign or for different programs or campaigns that we run around specifically child abuse is anti to what people have told us, some very very credible and lovely people, but somebody that a lot of people that I don't agree with. I am so sorry. I have no idea how my phone and my computer have synced. See, this is what happens when a lot of technology stuff happens and we grassroots people have no idea how to kind of manage stuff. But we are called on to webinars to give all the gyan, right? So I think, contrary to what that set of donors or people wanted us to believe, was that sad stories don't sell. Right, sad stories will not. On the contrary, that happy stories don't sell. You have to make a post or your main website banner picture some sort of like a child who needs help, right? And we have never agreed to that sort of understanding of how our communication or digital messaging or any sort of messaging should be, because we are wanting to create a space, which is healed and a happy space for the children that we are working with. If we start with the premise, it might help us get more dollars or more money, right? But is that the space we are wanting to be in as an organization? And the answer was it was a non-negotiable no, right? That we are okay to get less money, but we will put a story of a happy child, even if she's gone through trauma and a set of things, it's her choice to use what part of story that she wants to use, right? And stories are, which Rizvi also mentioned, that stories are things that are very they evoke empathy, right? They stories are some sort of like a good story will not just increase empathy but demonstrate model behavior, help fight stigma to a point where one of the reasons why we use happy stories and not sad stories at Protsahan's messaging or communication is also because we do realize that when you're using healing as the core tenet of our work, healing will come from a place of strength, right? Which again, I think Rima mentioned that. And in a day and age where your algorithms are changing on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and no matter what planning you've done on a certain day and at a certain time, an algorithm will work in a different way. How do you counteract that? Now, a lot of things that a lot of people don't know is that before Protsahan, I was in advertising and communication space. That was my first job until this particular kid who was going to a brothel, and she had to be kind of taken away from that place. And I didn't have any understanding of how the non-profit world would work, right? The only thing I understood was how creativity works, how communication probably works. And now that we are working with children, of course, to bring those understandings of strength-based work, art and play-based work, healing work, psychosocial trauma ko aap kaise heal karte ho? Healing is a big word. And I say that with a lot of responsibility, right? It's not some sort of spiritual healing or whatever, with all due respect. It is something that unless you understand the intersectionalities of what the child has gone through, the fact that she's a girl, for example, the fact that she's born in an extremely poor family, where every time for the want of something, she's figured or seen lack, she's not seen abundance of something. And that's a mindset, right? Abundance versus a scarcity mindset. These are core areas of, when we are working with children, for example, using affirmative identities, affirmations. What sort of affirmations, what sort of work in art and filming and photography and creative ways we're going to reach out to the child. And I think
2 minutes. Huh?
Yes.
2 minute one.
And I think this is where the understanding of how creativity can be used to work with children can be brought about. One, you have to understand the whole paradigm with empathy. Unless you put yourself in the child's shoes, it's very easy for a donor or people will say that I bash up the donor community. That's not true. I have some of my most fantastic friends from there. But something that needs to be called out with a lot of love, but needs to be called out, is that when you're looking at something as deep, that requires as deep a gestation as the healing, the trauma process of a child, right? You cannot look at tight deadlines. You cannot look at, hey, the casework needs to be completed all today. Sometimes it needs to be, the healing will happen at the pace of the child, right? The healing will happen, it's a human pace, right? And it'll be different for different children going through different stuff, different sorts of trauma. Now, how do you bring in creativity? So sometimes for one child dealing with stuff, it's photography that works for her. For sometimes it's just dance. For some kids, it's mandalas, working around mandalas through a guided healing process. And it takes, sometimes healing is one conversation, as I say, something just goes up in one deep conversation. Sometimes healing takes weeks and months, and sometimes it's just a process where you're growing through the grief that happened, that something happened with you. And I think when we use creativity in different forms, we have to make sure that it's not something that just we understand. It has to be comprehensible. It has to be strength based. The communication, the creativity has to be strength based. And very, very critically, it also, does not, it has to have a physiological impact, or the psychosocial impact on the communities that we are reaching out to. Thanks.
Thank you, Sonal. And just before we'll move into a few minutes, thanks, Sonal, a few minutes of Q&A. So if participants have any questions to raise, could you please put it into the chat box or the Q&A? And also, if there are any participants who feel triggered by the intensity of the conversations on this panel, I'm going to put my email into the chat, and do feel free to get in touch if you want to talk or have a more detailed conversation post this webinar. So we have literally 2 minutes, and Rizzi, you've raised your hand. You want to say? Oh, okay. There was a question about imagery and using images of children. What are your views on depicting children in vulnerable situations using their pictures or that of other children while creating visibility on the issue? I attempted to answer it in the chat, but if any of the panelists want to take this. Sonal, perhaps you?
I'm just reading the question.
Yeah.
This is very, very apt for the person who has asked this. I think this is something that we personally dealt with at Protsahan. Because we work with the same set of children, and out of the different sorts of child abuses that we encounter, it's child trafficking, it's child marriage, it's child sexual abuse, it's very, very violent physical abuse that the child goes through. So every time we had this question that if we are putting up a picture, but we are also the fact that we are seen to be more vocal against child sexual abuse, a lot of people felt that, and I think I personally felt more than anybody else, that we should not be using the pictures of the direct work with the children that we do. And gradually and very organically, we also we started kind of using a lot of illustrative material, illustrations. We started, but I think it's the basic child protection policy also says, if you're using a picture which is a copyright free picture, let's say from the internet, when you're talking about CSA or other issues as critical as that, you can always mention below that this as a star on an asterisk mark, saying that this picture is only for representative purposes. 1. 2, you can try and use pictures which show the back of the child, the head, or just the hand with a pencil, or just don't put the face of the child. And I think Prerna ATC does this very beautifully, that they work with some very, very vulnerable communities of children who've been trafficked, right? So they will never use the picture of the child, but they still talk about their work, right? This is important for any organization. So they will blur the faces of the children that they kind of are putting their picture. So this is a very critical point, and I wish more organizations really understood that.
Okay, we'll take 2 more questions before we close. One is, somebody has shared that she has been through an experience of child sexual abuse, and there's a question, I won't get into that, but then there's another question from her saying, what's your take on finding solace after? And then there's one more question, which is there, how to get more comfortable talking about child sexual abuse? How do I work on myself before I reach out to others? So maybe Rima, you want to take these? Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, if I may, yeah.
Yeah, please.
So the last one especially is very, very interesting because that's something we work, and I especially work with every day almost when we're doing counseling and healing and all of that, is a lot of people come to us when they are so fed up with all of this jargon around, oh, you got to be strong and you're amazing and you're beautiful still, because a lot of people who've gone through child sexual abuse, a big part of what they suffer from is body image issues and intimacy issues, and how to sort of appear in the world with confidence and grace. So I feel like as people who work in the healing sector, it is important to allow and hold space for pain, for it to fully go away, if it ever does. And sometimes I feel like it almost does, but some of it still stays. And that leap to a more holistic healing, I feel, can only be made where you sit with the pain and you allow the people who come to you to sit with the pain and to keep going over and over it again and again and again till you can transform it into purpose. And there are many, many, many ways to do that, many ways to do that. But if you don't allow for that space and you only project a certain image of this, okay, so you've gone through this, but this is what you need to be. But then who are you in the middle? And what is that changing and that, going through a sort of ringer does that to people, and how can that be used well in life, in clients' life, in people like, us? How do we use that to further our work, use in a very positive sort of affirmative sense? That's one. And if I may, to answer, how do you prepare, and all sort of, they have a similar tone. How do you prepare yourself first before you deal with things like this? How do you talk to teenagers when you talk about, all of these things, CSA and sexuality in general, is to really lighten up, is what I feel. To talk about all of the awkwardness with a sense of humor. And one might say, how do you talk about CSA with humor? When you talk about what comes before, hopefully, when somebody goes through pain, is how your body is changing and how you're growing and how you're, becoming a bigger person, an adult. And do it with humor, do it with fun, do it with jokes and, songs, which is what I learned, when I became a parent.
How do you shame out of it? Yeah.
And take the shame out of it and completely have fun with potty humor and pee humor and all of that, which kids really, really love. And that can be used as a space and an opening window to step in and talk about more difficult things. But talk about it in a way where they can relate to you.
Yeah. Last, Sonal, I'm going to come back to you. You wanted to make an interjection here, but there's also one last question, which I think we must answer. Is there a thing such as toxic positivity when dealing with a victim of sexual assault, and how can we avoid this? Maybe if you can.
Yeah. Thank you. I would just like to go and add on to what Rima said very beautifully. And I'd like to add a few things for the person who was asking this question. One is, thank you for sharing, trusting us, because I do see that the person has mentioned her name. So thank you for trusting the panel and us with your story. And we would not use it in any other which way. But one thing that I would like to say and tell you who put this question up is that never forget, wherever you're sitting, remember that healing is possible. Contrary to what you would have read, seen, made to be believed by some of your closest people, perhaps, remember that healing is in your own hands and it's possible. 1. 2, resilience. A lot of people say, oh, become courageous, be resilient, you will have no nightmares. I think that's pretty, for the lack of a better word, and pardon my slang, that's pretty bullshit. Resilience is something that it's not that, oh, you've bounced back for some, from a trauma, or you've bounced back from an incident. Aisa kabhi nahi hota hai, right? You learn to grieve through the process. And remember, darling, wherever you're sitting, remember that grief is okay. The fact that you are aware or you became aware that, yeah, I am grieving, for the next 6 months, 8 months, till my body, my mind wants to grieve, I would grieve through this. I will allow myself to grieve. Don't forget that, because nobody can take your grieving and your, something that, if you felt that a certain innocence or a part of you was lost, it's just, as hard as it may sound, make peace by grieving on it, okay? And that grieving, you will grow through that grief, okay? And that growth is what will heal you, right? It might sound like a lot of words, but the third thing that I would want to tell you is, at Protsahan, we work with a lot of young girls who've gone through very, very similar trauma. And we've tried to compile their stories of healing. So if through Nicole, I think Nicole said that she's already put her email ID down. If you could write an email to her, Nicole would send it to us. We would like to gift you this little book that we have, which talks about how wounds can heal. Right, and maybe those stories can inspire you, and maybe you can take a little ray of hope from there. But don't forget, darling, that healing is possible.
Okay, I'm gonna have to step in because I think we've overshot by almost 10 minutes now, and I think there's been so much of cross-pollination in this conversation itself. Things for communicators to think over, things for us as the sector to mull over for our own communication. And I just want to say thank you to all our panelists. And I think the one observation, and I think somewhere, the reason why we also came to you is that every single one of you has this innate ability to take something super complex, to not run from it, but to break it down with empathy, with openness, accepting responsibility, into something relatable that people would like to talk and engage with. So, I mean, just can't say thank you enough to our panelists, to our audience for sticking with this, though we overshot time. And thanks, Child Safety Week. And I hope all of you here will take messages from this and amplify in your own personal, social, or be it on your digital handles. Thanks so much, and bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.